The Empathic Echo. By Thomas King. Chapter 8. The Serpent's Coil. The alchemical workshop was a testament to controlled chaos. Shelves lined the stone walls, overflowing with an eclectic assortment of vials, jars, and retorts, each containing liquids of an unnatural hue. The air was thick with the pungent, sweet, and vaguely metallic scent of 100 different experiments colliding. Gears and levers, intricate contraptions of polished brass and darkened iron, hummed and whirred softly, testament to Kalen's meticulous, if unconventional, craftsmanship. In the center of the room, a cauldron bubbled with a luminescent, emerald liquid, casting dancing shadows that played across the alchemist's gaunt face. Elara stepped further into the sanctum, her cloaked form a stark contrast to the vibrant, almost sentient energy of the space. She had followed whispered rumors, pieced together fragmented conversations, all leading her to this hidden nook beneath the city's bustling mercantile district. The Shadow Syndicate was a hydra, its heads too numerous and too elusive to strike at directly. She needed intel, a weakness, a thread to pull that might unravel their entire operation. And Kalen, the disgraced alchemist, the man whispered to have trafficked in forbidden knowledge, was her last, and perhaps most dangerous, hope. Kalen looked up from his work, his eyes, the color of faded amethyst, sharp and assessing. A faint smile, more a baring of teeth than an expression of mirth, touched his lips. He wiped a smear of shimmering violet residue from his cheek with the back of a stained glove. "A visitor," he crooned, his voice raspy from disuse or perhaps from the potent fumes he so readily inhaled. "And not one who usually frequents my humble abode. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure, my dear?" Elara lowered her hood, revealing a face etched with determination, her gaze unwavering as it met his. "I seek information, Kalen. Information about the Shadow Syndicate." The alchemist's smile widened, a flicker of something akin to avarice in his eyes. He gestured to a stool across a cluttered workbench. "Information," he echoed, the word drawn out like a particularly potent elixir. "A valuable commodity, indeed. But not one that is freely dispensed. Knowledge, like the rarest of reagents, comes at a price." He turned back to his cauldron, stirring the luminous liquid with a long, slender glass rod. "And you, my lady, do not strike me as the type to pay in coin. What is it you offer in exchange for the secrets you so desperately covet?" Elara leaned against a sturdy wooden table, the cold of the stone beneath her boots a grounding sensation in the swirling, alchemical atmosphere. "I can offer you what you need," she stated, her voice calm and measured. "I can procure for you rare components, materials that are difficult to acquire. Tell me what you require, and if it is within my power, I will bring it to you." Kalen chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "Reagents? Oh, I could always use more reagents. The dragon's breath bloom, harvested under a blood moon, for instance. Or the crystallized tears of a shadow lurker, notoriously difficult to coax from their source. The iridescent scales of a sunken serpent, found only in the deepest abyssal trenches. These are but trifles, of course, but they would be a start." He paused, his amethyst eyes fixing on her again. "But I suspect your interest lies not solely in the advancement of my humble alchemical pursuits. You seek to disrupt the Syndicate's operations. And that, my dear, is a far more dangerous game than a simple trade of ingredients." He gestured with his glass rod, the glowing liquid clinging to it like molten glass. "The Shadow Syndicate. A hydra, you say? A fitting analogy. They are woven into the very fabric of this city, their tendrils reaching into every corner, every illicit trade, every clandestine meeting. To strike at them is to risk inviting their wrath upon oneself. And I, Elara, have learned the hard way that attracting the Syndicate's attention is rarely a pleasant experience." A shadow flickered across his face, a memory too painful to fully articulate. "You speak of prices," Elara continued, her voice steady. "And I have offered you components. But what is it that you truly desire, Kalen? What is the price that would make you risk your newfound quiet?" Kalen turned his full attention to her, the bubbling cauldron momentarily forgotten. He moved from behind the workbench, his steps surprisingly light for a man of his lean frame. He circled her slowly, his gaze dissecting, appraising. "Quiet?" he scoffed. "This is not quiet, my dear. This is hiding. This is a retreat. And I have grown weary of hiding. He stopped, facing her directly, his eyes blazing with a rekindled intensity. What I desire, Alara, is to reclaim what was taken from me. My reputation. My standing. My influence. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The Syndicate. They did not simply ruin me. They erased me. They took my discoveries, my patrons, my very name from the scrolls of influence. They left me with nothing but this cluttered sanctuary and the acrid smell of my own failures. But failures can be repurposed. And this knowledge I possess, this ability to transmute, to distill, to create that which others deem impossible, it is a power that the Syndicate itself would covet. They deal in shadows, in brute force, in intimidation. They lack finesse. They lack true artifice. He tapped a long, slender finger against a particularly intricate brass astrolabe humming softly on a nearby table. Imagine, Alara, what we could achieve. Your desire to dismantle the Syndicate, my desire for retribution and restoration. We are two sides of the same tarnished coin, are we not? I can provide you with insights into their operations, their weaknesses, their secret pathways. I could devise methods to cripple their supply lines, to sow discord within their ranks, to expose their hidden dealings. But my craft, the true alchemy of it all, requires resources. Resources that only someone with your unique capabilities can acquire. And the protection you mentioned? Alara prompted, her mind already sifting through the implications. Kalen wasn't merely seeking a buyer for information. He was seeking an ally, a partner, someone to shoulder the risk. Ah, yes. Protection. Kalen smiled again, that predatory gleam returning. The Syndicate, as you well know, does not take kindly to those who interfere. If I am to aid you in this endeavor, I will require assurances. Assurances that I will not be left to face their retribution alone. I will need a guarantee that should things turn inconvenient, you will stand by me. That you will protect this workshop, and more importantly, protect me. My knowledge is my lifeblood, and I will not have it spilled carelessly onto the unforgiving streets. He gestured around the workshop, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and desperation. These are not mere trinkets and concoctions, Alara. This is the culmination of years of study, of forbidden research, of pushing the boundaries of what is known. The Syndicate destroyed my public life, but they could not extinguish the fire of my intellect. They underestimated the resilience of a true alchemist. And now, they will learn the error of their ways. He paused, his gaze piercing. So tell me, Alara, what is your offer? Beyond the reagents, beyond the assurances of protection, what is it that you are truly willing to give to unravel the serpent's coil? For I assure you, the information I possess is potent enough to cause significant tremors within their shadowed empire. But such tremors require a strong hand to guide them, and a deep well of resources to sustain them. Your cooperation, your commitment, will be the catalyst. And in return I will provide you with the means to strike at the heart of the Syndicate. But understand this, the price is not merely materials and protection. The price is also a willingness to embrace the shadows, to understand the dark arts that govern their power, and to wield them, in turn, with a precision and a ferocity they have never anticipated. Alara considered his words, the weight of his proposition settling upon her. Kalen was clearly playing a dangerous game, one that went beyond mere information brokering. He sought to rebuild himself, using the Syndicate's own secrets and Alara's resources as his foundation. It was a gamble, but the potential reward, a significant blow against the Syndicate, was too great to ignore. I will procure your reagents, Alara stated, her voice firm. The dragon's breath bloom, the sunken serpent scales, and if possible, the shadow lurker tears. I will also ensure your workshop and your person are protected from any immediate Syndicate retaliation. But you must be clear, Kalen. Your information must be actionable, and it must be accurate. I will not risk lives on conjecture or half-truths. Kalen's smile returned, broader and more genuine this time, though still edged with a certain wildness. Excellent! You have chosen wisely, my dear. Accuracy is my creed, and disruption is my art. Now let us speak of the specific vulnerabilities of our mutual adversaries. He gestured towards a sturdy, leather-bound tome lying open on a nearby table, its pages filled with arcane symbols and intricate diagrams. The serpent's coil, as you aptly put it, has a heart that beats with a predictable rhythm, if one knows where to listen. And I, Elara, have spent a great deal of time listening. He tapped the book. Their network of smugglers, their clandestine meeting points, the identities of their enforcers, and the nature of their current illicit trade, all of this is laid bare within these pages. But to truly exploit these weaknesses, we must employ more than simple brute force. We must be insidious. We must be clever. We must be alchemists of deception, sowing discord and chaos with precisely calculated maneuvers. Elara moved closer, her eyes scanning the complex script. What is their current trade? She asked, her voice low. I have heard whispers of something new. Something that has the city on edge. Kalen's gaze flickered to the bubbling cauldron, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. Ah, yes. Their latest venture. A highly volatile concoction indeed. They call it Whispers of the Void. A psychotropic substance derived from the rarest of fungal growths found in the deepest, darkest caverns. It amplifies primal fears, induces vivid hallucinations, and if used in sufficient quantities, can shatter the very will of its victims. They intend to use it to control the city's elite, to bend their will to the syndicate's every whim. A most crude and effective method of subjugation. He turned back to Elara, his expression now one of grim determination. But it is also incredibly unstable. The process of its refinement is fraught with peril, even for those with intimate knowledge of its composition. And that, my dear Elara, is where we come in. I can devise a counteragent, a nullifier that will render their Whispers of the Void inert, or worse, turn it back upon its creators. But to do so, I require the aforementioned reagents. The dragon's breath bloom will be essential for stabilizing the volatile compounds, the sunken serpent scales will lend their potent neutralizing properties, and the shadow lurker tears, well, they are the key to unraveling the very essence of the drug's hallucinogenic effects. He walked over to a large, ornate alembic, its glass chambers glinting in the dim light. Their operation is centered around a series of hidden laboratories, disguised as innocuous businesses within the mercantile district. One such lab, I believe, is currently producing the latest batch of this Whispers of the Void. If we can infiltrate it, sabotage the process, and perhaps steal a sample of the raw ingredients, that would be an invaluable first step. Elara nodded, absorbing the information. The syndicate was moving beyond simple extortion and violence. They were seeking a more insidious form of control. This was a threat that needed to be dealt with swiftly and decisively. Where is this laboratory? She asked. And what is the nature of the sabotage you envision? Kalen's eyes gleamed. The primary processing laboratory is located beneath the Gilded Quill, a seemingly reputable purveyor of fine stationery and cartography supplies. A clever facade, wouldn't you agree? And my plan for sabotage, it is elegant, if I do say so myself. I have devised a volatile alchemical compound, one that, when introduced into their refining process, will not merely neutralize the Whispers of the Void, but will create a catastrophic chain reaction, destroying their entire batch and rendering their laboratory unusable for a considerable time. It will be spectacular. He paused, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. However, such a precise introduction requires a steady hand and a degree of stealth. I will require you to procure the components for this counteragent as well. A specific blend of phosphorescent moss, ground phoenix feather, and dew collected from a nocturnal bloom known as the Sorrow's Kiss. These, combined with the reagents I need for my research, will form the foundation of our attack. And what of the guards? Elara asked, her mind already mapping out potential infiltration routes. The syndicate does not leave its operations unguarded. Ah, the guards, Kalen mused, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. They are typically brutish. Easily distracted, easily intimidated. I have developed a series of mild hallucinogenic aerosols. A single puff, administered discreetly, will induce a temporary state of profound disorientation. Enough time for you to slip past them, introduce my concoction, and escape unnoticed. It is a delicate dance, of course, but one that I am confident you are capable of performing. He walked back to his workbench, picking up a small, intricately carved wooden charm. "This," he said, offering it to Elara, "will assist you. It is imbued with a subtle enchantment that will mask your presence from mundane detection for a short period. It is not foolproof against highly trained individuals, but for the Syndicate's average muscle, it should suffice." Elara accepted the charm, its smooth surface cool against her palm. The weight of the task ahead was significant, but the prospect of striking such a blow against the Syndicate was a powerful motivator. "I will gather your reagents, Kalen, and I will deliver them to you here, within 3 days. Then, we will discuss the specifics of the infiltration." Kalen nodded, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. 3 days? Excellent. It will give me ample time to prepare the counteragent and the distraction aerosols. And perhaps, I can even begin to formulate the next phase of our plan. For this is merely the beginning, Elara. The Shadow Syndicate has grown too bold, too arrogant. It is time for them to learn that even in the deepest shadows, there are those who can bring the light, or in this case, the volatile, explosive reaction of pure alchemy. He turned back to his bubbling cauldron, the emerald liquid shimmering with an almost hypnotic intensity. "The serpent's coil," he murmured, "is about to be tightened. And we, my dear Elara, will be the ones to tighten it. Now, if you will excuse me, I have delicate work to attend to. The scent of their fear is already beginning to waft on the wind, and I must be prepared to distill it into something truly potent." Elara gave a curt nod, a newfound respect for the disgraced alchemist mingling with a healthy dose of caution. Kalen was a dangerous ally, driven by ambition and a thirst for retribution. But he was also undeniably brilliant, and his knowledge was precisely what she needed to bring the Shadow Syndicate to its knees. She turned and walked towards the workshop's entrance, the pungent, alchemical aroma clinging to her like a second skin. The bargain was struck. The dance with the shadows had begun. Kalen's amethyst eyes, usually alight with the feverish gleam of discovery, were clouded with a disquieting gravity. He motioned Elara to a shadowed corner of his workshop, away from the seductive shimmer of his alchemical creations. The air here felt heavier, charged with an unspoken dread that even the potent fumes of his experiments could not mask. He lowered his voice, the raspiness now laced with a grim urgency. "You speak of the Syndicate's new venture, Whispers of the Void. A psychotropic agent, you say? Crude but effective for their purposes. However, this is merely a symptom, Elara. A distraction, perhaps, from a far more insidious ambition." He picked up a small, lead-lined box from a shelf, its surface intricately etched with symbols that seemed to writhe in the dim light. He unlatched it with a series of precise clicks, revealing within a collection of brittle, parchment-like scrolls. "The Syndicate is not merely dabbling in poisons and intimidation anymore. They are delving into forbidden arts, ancient practices that even the most seasoned sorcerers would shun. They are attempting to harness that which should remain unbound, to control the very essence of sentience." He carefully extracted one of the scrolls, its edges crumbling slightly at his touch. "They call it soul forging," he whispered, the term hanging in the air like a curse. "It is a perversion of ancient rituals, a violent melding of mortal will and incorporeal essence. They seek to bypass the natural, organic bond between a soul and its host, forcing a connection, amplifying it, and then, critically, controlling it. Imagine, Elara, an army not of flesh and blood, but of amplified emotional spirits, driven by a singular, imposed will. Fear, rage, despair, all channeled and magnified to an unimaginable degree." Elara's hand instinctively tightened around the hilt of her hidden dagger. The concept was chilling, far more terrifying than any conventional weapon or drug. "Emotional spirits? You mean like echoes of strong feelings? Or actual disembodied entities?" Kalen's lips twisted into a grimace. "It begins with echoes, certainly. Residual energies left behind by intense emotion, or perhaps even the fragmented remnants of souls that have been torn asunder. But the Syndicate's ambition extends beyond mere amplification. They are developing methods to forge these essences, to bind them, to imbue them with a semblance of their own corrupted will. They are creating what can only be described as artificial spirits, or perhaps more accurately, emotional constructs, designed for subjugation. And the process, it is exceedingly dangerous." He unrolled the scroll further, revealing diagrams that depicted intricate, agonizing patterns of energy transfer. Soul forging, he explained, his voice low and measured, is a process that can shatter a spirit. It can twist it, corrupt it, until it is merely a hollow vessel, incapable of independent thought or feeling, driven only by the commands of its binder. The power that a wielder gains from such a forged spirit is immense. They can project their emotions, their fears, their desires, directly onto others, overwhelming their minds, bending their wills with an irresistible force. But the cost is catastrophic. He tapped a point on the diagram where lines converged in a chaotic, almost violent explosion of energy. For the spirit itself, it is agony. A slow, agonizing dissolution of self, replaced by a foreign, imposed consciousness. And for the wielder, the corruption does not stop at the spirit. The constant manipulation, the forced resonance with these amplified emotions, it erodes the wielder's own mind, their own soul. They become a conduit for a torrent of amplified, often dark, emotions, and that torrent inevitably wears them down, twists them, until they are as broken and hollow as the spirits they command. Some scholars of forbidden lore believe that this is how ancient entities of immense power, demons and the like, are born, from the remnants of such corrupted souls and forged spirits, seeking to remake themselves in their own image. Elara felt a cold dread seep into her bones. This was not merely a criminal enterprise, it was a perversion of life itself. "How do you know all this, Kalen? And why are you telling me?" He carefully re-rolled the scroll and placed it back into its lead-line box. "I told you, Elara, the Syndicate did not simply ruin me. They silenced me. They stole my research, my patrons, my reputation, because I refused to participate in their more ethically questionable endeavors. They pushed me towards the brink, but they never broke my intellect. I continued my studies in secret, delving into the same forbidden texts they now employ. I anticipated they would eventually seek to control more than just the city's markets and its underbelly. They crave absolute dominion, and this soul forging is their chosen path." He met her gaze, his amethyst eyes burning with a fierce, almost desperate light. "I am telling you because this is a threat that transcends mere greed or political maneuvering. It is a fundamental corruption of existence. And I cannot stand by and watch it unfold. My knowledge, my research, it was always meant to advance understanding, not to facilitate such abominations. These journals," he indicated the lead-line box, "contain fragments of their methodology, enough to understand the process, the reagents they might employ, and perhaps, a key to disrupting it. They are coded, of course, layered with alchemical and arcane ciphers that only someone with a deep understanding of both disciplines could decipher." He opened the box again, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns on another scroll. "This one details the process of binding. It speaks of specific emotional resonances, the harmonic frequencies required to attract and then ensnare the chosen essence. It mentions the use of specially prepared crystals, infused with catalysts that amplify psychic resonance, materials I suspect are incredibly difficult to acquire, and likely found in places most people would not dare to venture." He then picked up a third scroll. "This is the most disturbing. It outlines the methods of imprinting, the process by which the Syndicate's masters infuse their will into the forged spirits. It speaks of rituals performed under specific celestial alignments, of sacrifices that fuel the transfer of consciousness. The sheer barbarity of it makes the whispers of the void seem like child's play." Kalen paused, his breathing deepening. "The power they seek is immense, Elara. Imagine a force that can project pure terror into the hearts of thousands, that can compel armies to march into oblivion, that can sow discord and madness with a single thought. They believe they can control it, wield it like a sword. But they are fools. They are playing with forces they do not understand, forces that have a will of their own, even in their corrupted state. This path leads not to dominion, but to utter destruction, for the wielder and for the world." He held out the lead-line box to Elara. "I have deciphered enough of these to understand the general principles, the dangers, and the potential countermeasures. But I cannot physically acquire the reagents they use, nor can I infiltrate their hidden sanctums. My past dealings have made me a marked man, and my current activities require a degree of discretion. I am the architect of the knowledge, Elara, but you are the one with the capacity to act. Elara carefully took the box, its weight surprisingly substantial. The scrolls within felt imbued with a malevolent energy, a palpable sense of wrongness. You believe they are actively engaged in this soul forging now? Not just experimenting? The signs are there, Kalen confirmed, his voice grim. The increased secrecy surrounding their operations, the acquisition of highly unusual components that appear on no legitimate trade manifest, the recruitment of individuals with specific talents in manipulating and amplifying psychic energies. Whispers of the Void is likely a test run, a means to weaken the populace, to make them more susceptible to the direct psychic assaults that soul-forged entities can inflict. They are building their arsenal, Elara, and if they succeed, this city, and perhaps far beyond, will fall under an unimaginable tyranny. He gestured towards a cluster of alchemical equipment humming with a soft, internal light. I have been working on a theoretical countermeasure, a way to disrupt the binding process, to destabilize the forged spirits, and perhaps even to sever the connection between the wielder and their corrupted essence. But it requires incredibly rare components. The solidified tears of a moon moth, harvested only during a lunar eclipse. The powdered heartwood of a whispering willow, which grows only in places where great sorrow has deeply saturated the earth. And most critically, the untainted essence of a nascent starseed, a fragment of celestial energy that has not yet coalesced into a celestial body. These are not items one finds in a market stall. Elara's mind raced. Moon moths were creatures of legend, their tears said to possess potent illusionary qualities. Whispering willows were whispered to grow in cursed graveyards, their wood imbued with residual grief. And a starseed? That was beyond comprehension. These are extraordinary requirements, Kalen. I cannot guarantee I can acquire such things. I know, he replied, his gaze steady. But the alternative is far worse. These scrolls, he tapped the lead line box, are your guide. They detail the components, the processes, the celestial alignments, the ritualistic incantations. They are dangerous knowledge, Elara, and I offer them to you with the understanding that their very existence is a risk. But I believe you are capable of wielding this knowledge responsibly, of using it to dismantle their operation before it reaches its terrible culmination. The Syndicate believes they are forging power, but they are, in fact, forging their own damnation. And with these journals, you may just find the means to hasten that process. He pushed a small, intricately carved wooden charm towards her, similar to the one he had given her before. This will offer a measure of protection. It can disrupt minor psychic probes and cloak your presence from those who rely solely on rudimentary magical senses. It will not shield you from the full force of a soul-forged entity, but it might give you the edge you need to escape, to observe, to survive long enough to understand the true nature of their threat. Elara picked up the charm, its smooth, cool surface offering a strange sense of comfort. The task ahead was daunting, the path fraught with peril she could barely begin to comprehend. But the alternative, allowing the Syndicate to unleash such a corrupted power upon the world, was unthinkable. She looked at Kalen, the disgraced alchemist who had become an unlikely guardian of forbidden knowledge. I will study these journals, Kalen, she said, her voice firm. And I will do everything within my power to acquire the components you need. But I will need your expertise. If I am to confront this soul forging, I will need to understand its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities. Your knowledge is our only hope. Kalen offered a rare, genuine smile, tinged with a weary hope. Then it is settled. We have a common enemy, Elara, and a mutual goal. They seek to forge dominion from corruption, and we shall forge their undoing from the very knowledge they so greedily hoard. The serpent's coil tightens, indeed, but this time, it will be their own fangs that ensnare them. He turned back to his workbench, his hands already moving with renewed purpose, his mind already delving into the arcane complexities of what lay ahead. The scrolls, heavy with forbidden lore, felt like a brand in Elara's hands, a testament to the dangerous alliance she had forged in the alchemist's shadowed sanctum. The Syndicate's deepest secrets were now hers to unravel, secrets that promised not only power, but profound destruction. The weight of Kalen's revelation settled heavily upon Elara. The lead-line box, now tucked securely within her satchel, felt like a Pandora's box of forbidden knowledge, each scroll within humming with a dark potential. Her initial understanding of the Syndicate's machinations, their crude psychotropic drugs and their iron grip on the city's underbelly, now seemed laughably naive. Soul forging. The term itself was a visceral affront, a violation of the natural order that sent shivers down her spine. Kalen's description of spirits twisted and corrupted, of wielders consumed by the very darkness they sought to control, painted a chilling picture of a power that was as self-destructive as it was terrifying. As she navigated the labyrinthine alleyways, the city's usual cacophony of sounds, the distant cries of vendors, the rumble of cartwheels, the hushed whispers of clandestine meetings, seemed to take on a more sinister hue. Every shadow seemed to conceal a hidden watcher, every echoing footstep a potential pursuer. Kalen had been clear: the Syndicate's ambitions had escalated, and their pursuit of this, soul forging, was no longer a theoretical exploration but an active, dangerous undertaking. The journals, filled with coded references to alchemical reagents, celestial alignments, and ritualistic sacrifices, were her only guide, a testament to the depths to which the Syndicate had sunk. She clutched the small wooden charm Kalen had given her, its smooth surface a small comfort against the gnawing unease. It offered a measure of protection, a psychic shield against lesser intrusions, but she knew it would be of little use against the true horrors Kalen had described. The power Kalen spoke of, the ability to project pure terror, to compel legions, to sound madness with a single thought, was a power that defied conventional understanding, a power that twisted the very essence of sentience. The journals, however, held more than just the methodology of this abhorrent art. As Alara began the painstaking process of deciphering Kalen's coded notes, a secondary, equally disturbing pattern began to emerge. The Syndicate's focus was not solely on the general subjugation of the populace, nor was their interest in soul forging confined to creating an army of emotionally enslaved thralls. There was a distinct thread running through their research, a specific objective that seemed to eclipse all others: the acquisition of a particular kind of power, a power derived from individuals exhibiting what the journals vaguely termed unusual resonance. Kalen had alluded to it in his descriptions of the binding process, mentioning the need for specific harmonic frequencies to attract and ensnare essences. But the Syndicate's internal memos, pieced together from the cryptic entries in the scrolls, spoke of more than just ambient spiritual energies. They spoke of specific sources, of individuals whose very presence seemed to warp the fabric of reality, whose inner energies pulsed with a power that defied natural explanation. These were not mere echoes of emotion, they were potent, living conduits of extraordinary force. One particular passage, heavily encrypted and riddled with alchemical shorthand, sent a chill through Alara. It detailed the Syndicate's efforts to identify and locate individuals whose temporal signatures were anomalous. The word itself was stark, unsettling. Temporal signatures. The manipulation of time was a concept far beyond the realm of alchemical experimentation, bordering on the divine, or perhaps, as Kalen had warned, the demonic. They were not just looking for raw power, they were looking for power that could bend and shape the very flow of existence. The implication was clear and terrifying. They were aware of, or actively hunting for, beings like Zan. Zan, the enigmatic figure who had appeared in her life as suddenly as a bolt of lightning, his presence marked by an uncanny ability to manipulate time, to move through moments, as if they were mere puddles. He was a living paradox, a walking anomaly, and the Syndicate, in their insatiable hunger for dominion, had identified him as a prime target. The journals didn't explicitly name Zan, of course. The Syndicate operated with extreme caution, their internal communications couched in layers of code and euphemism. But the descriptions were unmistakable: individuals who could leap between moments, whose echoes reverberated through causality, whose very existence was a temporal anomaly. These were the very characteristics that defined Zan. Alara's mind reeled. If the Syndicate was aware of Zan, their intentions towards him would be dire. They sought to control what they could not understand, and in Zan's case, that meant either capturing him to dissect his abilities, to unlock the secrets of his temporal manipulation, or, failing that, to eliminate him as a critical variable in their grand design. His ability to seemingly defy the linear progression of time made him an unpredictable factor, a force that could disrupt their meticulously laid plans for an army of soul-forged entities. She recalled Kalen's warning about the corrupting nature of soul forging, about how it could shatter a spirit, twist it, and bind it to an external will. The thought of such a fate befalling Zan, of his unique temporal gifts being twisted and exploited by the Syndicate's dark arts, was unbearable. It was not just a threat to him, it was a threat to the very balance of power that existed, however precarious, in the city. If the Syndicate gained control of an entity capable of manipulating time, their dominion would be absolute, their reign inescapable. The Syndicate's methods for identifying such individuals were as chilling as their ultimate goal. The journals spoke of specialized scrying tools, not for detecting conventional magical auras, but for sensing subtle disruptions in the ambient temporal field. They employed individuals with a heightened sensitivity to causality, those who could feel the subtle ripples caused by significant temporal shifts. It was a terrifyingly sophisticated hunt, a spider meticulously weaving its web, waiting for its prey to stumble in. One particular entry described a ritual designed to amplify the senses of their agents, allowing them to perceive echoes of displaced moments. It involved the use of rare alchemical compounds, including the phosphorescent dust of a deep-sea anglerfish and the concentrated essence of a desert mirage, ingredients that hinted at the Syndicate's willingness to plumb the deepest and most desolate corners of the world in their pursuit of power. Ilara imagined the Syndicate's hunters, their senses unnaturally sharpened, combing the city, their eyes scanning for the faintest anomaly, their ears straining for the faintest whisper of displaced time. They would be looking for the telltale signs, a flicker of impossible speed, a sudden unexplainable stillness, a moment that seemed to repeat itself. And Zan, with his open displays of temporal manipulation, would be a beacon to them. The urgency of her mission intensified. This wasn't just about preventing the creation of an army of emotionally enslaved beings. It was about protecting Zan, about ensuring that his unique abilities were not twisted into a weapon of unimaginable destruction. She had to find him, warn him, and perhaps, in conjunction with Kalen's knowledge, devise a way to counter the Syndicate's hunt. The scrolls also hinted at a potential weakness in their method of hunting. The unusual resonance they sought was described as inherently unstable, a power that could easily overwhelm the untrained or the unprepared. While the Syndicate aimed to control it, they also seemed to fear it, evidenced by the elaborate precautions and containment protocols detailed in their research. This fear, Ilara realized, could be their undoing. A power that could shatter a spirit could also, perhaps, shatter the one who sought to control it. Kalen's initial revelation about soul forging had been a shock, but this new layer of information, the active pursuit of individuals like Zan, elevated the threat to a cosmic level. The Syndicate wasn't just playing with souls, they were playing with time itself, a force far more fundamental and dangerous. She found herself tracing the lines of the diagrams on the scrolls, the intricate patterns now seeming to represent not just alchemical processes, but the very threads of causality that held existence together. The Syndicate's ambition was no longer just about control, it was about rewriting the fundamental rules of reality. And Zan, with his inherent ability to disrupt those rules, was the key variable they needed to either control or eliminate. The serpent's coil was tightening, not just around the city, but around the very fabric of time. And Ilara, armed with Kalen's forbidden knowledge and a growing sense of dread, was now at the heart of its coils. She had to move quickly. The hunt for Zan was already underway, and the Syndicate's shadowy agents were undoubtedly closing in. The fate of not only the city, but perhaps the very flow of time, rested on her ability to unravel the Syndicate's deepest, most dangerous secret. The air in Ilara's small rented room hung thick with the weight of Kalen's words. He had laid bare the Syndicate's avarice, their horrifying descent into the blasphemy of soul forging, and now, a new layer of their depravity, the exploitation of elemental beings. The lead-lined box, still nestled in her satchel, pulsed with a silent menace, a repository of knowledge that felt increasingly like a ticking time bomb. Kalen's description of an elemental spirit, specifically a nascent storm leviathan, captured and bound for some nefarious purpose, painted a picture of a power that transcended mere human ambition. It was a cosmic violation, an attempt to harness forces that should remain wild and untamed. They intend to use it, Kalen had rasped, his voice a dry whisper. As a demonstration. A display of their mastery over the raw forces of creation. And perhaps as bait. He had then provided a location, a place on the city's forgotten periphery where the old aqueducts crumbled into the marshlands, and a time, 3 nights hence, under the cloak of the new moon. It was a gamble, a calculated risk offered by a man who seemed to walk a razor's edge between salvation and damnation. Elara traced the faded patterns on the scrolls, the coded entries now feeling like pieces of a monstrous puzzle. Kalen's veiled warnings about the Leviathan's immense potential were enough to send a tremor through her. Such a creature, when fully realized, could command the very skies, unleash tempests that could scour cities from existence. The Syndicate, in their hubris, sought to leash this power, to twist it into a tool of their dominion. What horrified her more was the implication of a demonstration. Who were they trying to impress, or perhaps, intimidate? Was this a show of force for their own internal hierarchy, or a warning to a rival faction, or even a targeted display for someone, or something, they wished to lure? The location Kalen had given her, the sunken arches, a place whispered about in hushed tones, a network of forgotten waterways now claimed by the encroaching swamp and the desperate denizens of the city's fringes, added another layer of unease. It was a place where shadows clung like moss, where the stench of decay mingled with the metallic tang of stagnant water. It was precisely the kind of desolate, forgotten corner the Syndicate would choose for their clandestine operations, far from prying eyes and the suffocating grasp of the city watch. Kalen's words, though cryptic, held a dangerous allure. They will be showcasing its nascent power, he'd explained, his eyes, sharp and unsettlingly bright, fixed on hers. A controlled release, designed to impress and perhaps to terrorize. The timing, it's crucial. They want to make a statement before the solstice. And that statement will involve the bending of nature itself. He'd then produced a small, intricately carved shard of obsidian, no larger than her thumb. This, he'd said, pressing it into her palm, will help you navigate the currents of their influence. It will not protect you from their wards, but it will help you sense the ebb and flow of their amplified energies. Think of it as a divining rod for their dark rituals. The obsidian shard felt unnervingly warm against her skin, a subtle thrumming that resonated with the unease in her gut. Kalen was playing a dangerous game, feeding her just enough information to lure her into a trap, or perhaps, into a situation where she could exploit his own gambit. He was a serpent, coiled and ready to strike, but Elara was beginning to understand that he might be the only one who could help her decipher the Syndicate's deadly coils. His motives remained shrouded in mystery, as opaque as the lead-line box, but his knowledge was a potent weapon, and she was determined to wield it. She thought of Zan, of his own extraordinary abilities, his seamless navigation of time. The Syndicate's pursuit of individuals with unusual resonance was no longer a theoretical threat, it was an active hunt. If they were capable of capturing and attempting to control an elemental of such magnitude, what would they do if they finally cornered Zan? The idea sent a fresh wave of dread through her. Zan, a being who could bend the very fabric of moments, would be an unparalleled prize, or a catastrophic threat to be neutralized. Kalen's offer, dangerous as it was, might be her only chance to gather intel on the Syndicate's current capabilities and their ultimate aims, potentially finding a way to protect Zan before they could ever find him. The journals had spoken of the Syndicate's increasing reliance on specialized artifacts and alchemical concoctions to amplify their agents' senses, to allow them to perceive and interact with energies that were normally beyond mortal comprehension. The Storm Leviathan, Kalen had implied, was the ultimate amplifier, a living nexus of raw power that could be channeled and directed. The idea of such a creature being unleashed, even in a controlled environment, was deeply unsettling. It spoke of a profound arrogance, a belief that they could command the very forces that shaped the world. Elara reviewed the coded entries again, searching for any hint of the specific nature of the demonstration. Was it a display of destructive power, a warning to those who dared to oppose them? Or was it a more subtle form of manipulation, a demonstration of their ability to control and imbue lesser beings with their corrupted essence? The journals offered no clear answer, only a chilling ambiguity that fueled her apprehension. The Syndicate thrived on fear and uncertainty, and this operation, cloaked in secrecy and powered by a captive elemental, was designed to sow both. She considered the implications of Kalen's offer to help. Was he offering to join her, or to guide her from the shadows? His knowledge of the Syndicate was intimate, born from his own past entanglements. He understood their methods, their hierarchies, their deep-seated hunger for power. He was, in many ways, a mirror image of the darkness she was trying to fight, a testament to the corrupting influence of the syndicate. If she was to venture into the sunken arches, she would need every advantage, and Kaelin's insights, however perilous, were invaluable. The challenge lay in discerning his true intentions. Was he using her to dismantle the syndicate from within, or was he orchestrating a scenario where she would become the primary target, a pawn in his own complex game? The obsidian shard felt like a tangible representation of their entanglement, a tool of guidance, yet also a constant reminder of the dangerous path they were treading. It was a conduit for sensing the syndicate's amplified energies, but also a beacon for Kaelin's own manipulations. She imagined the scene Kaelin had described, a desolate, forgotten place, charged with an unnatural energy. The storm Leviathan, its form flickering, crackling with barely contained power, the syndicate's acolytes and enforcers gathered around, their faces illuminated by the unnatural glow of their captive's essence. It was a tableau of corruption, a testament to their twisted ambition. The thought of witnessing such an event firsthand, of being so close to the heart of their operation, was both terrifying and exhilarating. This was her chance to see the serpent's coil not as a theoretical threat, but as a tangible, monstrous entity. The journals also offered a sliver of hope, a hint of vulnerability in the syndicate's obsessive quest for control. The very act of soul forging, Kaelin had explained, was a brutal and often unstable process. The spirits, when forcibly bound, could resist, could fight back in ways that could shatter the wielder's sanity, or even their very being. And an elemental spirit, particularly one as primal as a storm Leviathan, would possess a will far more potent and resistant to corruption than any mortal soul. Their attempt to control it was an act of profound hubris, and hubris, as history had shown, was often the harbinger of a great fall. The warning was clear: the syndicate was escalating their operations. They were moving beyond the manipulation of human minds and emotions, delving into the realm of raw, untamed power. Their pursuit of individuals like Zan was a logical, albeit terrifying, progression. If they could harness the fury of a storm, what couldn't they achieve by enslaving a creature that could bend time? Elara knew she couldn't afford to hesitate. The 3 nights until the new moon felt like an eternity, and yet they would pass in the blink of an eye. The stakes were too high, the potential consequences too dire, to allow fear to paralyze her. She had to prepare, to plan, and to venture into the heart of the serpent's coil. Kaelin had set a trap, but he had also inadvertently offered her a key, a way to turn his deadly game to her advantage. She would walk into the sunken arches, not as prey, but as an observer, a saboteur, and perhaps a liberator. The storm was coming, and she had to be ready to face it. The weight of Kaelin's words, heavy with the stench of the syndicate's depravity, still clung to Elara like a shroud. The lead-lined box, a repository of unspeakable truths, hummed with a silent, menacing energy against her hip. His description of the captive storm Leviathan, a nascent titan of the skies, twisted into a tool of terror, had painted a vivid, horrifying picture. The syndicate's ambition, once a gnawing beast of greed, had now mutated into something far more monstrous, a desire to ensnare the very essence of creation. The sunken arches, a place of forgotten sorrows and creeping decay, was to be their stage, the new moon a curtain drawn for their blasphemous performance. The obsidian shard, warm and throbbing in her palm, was both a guide and a constant, chilling reminder of the serpent she was now entwined with. Kaelin, the master manipulator, had offered a perilous path, but Elara knew, with a growing certainty, that it was the only path available. She had to see the serpent's coil unmasked, to understand its insidious reach before it could ensnare others, before it could shatter the fragile peace she fought to protect. But Elara was not the only one sensing the creeping darkness. Miles away, in a quiet corner of the kingdom, a young man named Zan wrestled with his own burgeoning disquiet. His gift, a capricious and often bewildering ability to perceive and sometimes manipulate the currents of time, was beginning to react to the growing disturbance, like a finely tuned instrument vibrating in the presence of a discordant note. He felt it as a pressure, a subtle warping of the temporal flow, a discordant hum beneath the surface of the everyday. It wasn't a singular event, but a pervasive wrongness that prickled his senses and sent shivers down his spine. He would be in the midst of a simple task, perhaps polishing a brass clock face until it gleamed, or tracing the intricate patterns of a tapestry, when the world would ripple. Not a physical tremor, but a temporal hiccup, a brief stutter in the relentless march of seconds. In those fleeting moments, fragmented images would flash before his eyes, unbidden and disorienting. He saw a form, vast and writhing, encased in shimmering, ethereal chains. It was a creature of immense power, its essence a tempest held captive, and the agony radiating from it was palpable, a silent scream that echoed in the deepest parts of his being. He saw a spirit in torment, its roars unheard, its fury contained but not extinguished. Then, the vision would shift, replaced by glimpses of shadowy figures, their faces obscured by deep cowls, their hands weaving intricate patterns in the air. They moved with a sinister grace, their gestures imbued with a dark energy that felt alien and corrupt. He saw arcane symbols, pulsing with malevolent light, and felt the chilling whisper of forbidden rituals. These were not the magics of scholarship or healing, these were forces that clawed at the very fabric of existence, seeking to twist and dominate. He saw the gleam of metal, not the honest sheen of a blacksmith's forge, but the cold, hard gleam of instruments designed for capture and control. These visions, though fleeting and cryptic, began to coalesce into a sense of impending doom. Zan, still struggling to master the nuances of his own temporal abilities, felt a growing conviction that his destiny was inextricably linked to this encroaching darkness. He could sense the ripples of this disturbance spreading, a stain on the tapestry of time itself, and he knew, with a certainty that both frightened and compelled him, that he was meant to be a bulwark against it. He often found himself staring at his own hands, willing the temporal currents to reveal more, to offer clarity. But his powers remained elusive, like mist that dissolved at the slightest touch. He could nudge time forward by a heartbeat, or glimpse echoes of the recent past, but the grander shifts, the visions that plagued him, remained beyond his conscious control. It was as if his own nascent abilities were a wild, untamed river, surging with a power he could barely comprehend, let alone direct. The storm Leviathan's suffering, the shadowy figure's malevolent designs, these glimpses of a brewing catastrophe felt like a clarion call, a summons to a battle he was ill-equipped to fight. One afternoon, while attempting to rewind a dropped teacup to its unbroken state, a feat he had only managed once before, and with great difficulty, a particularly vivid vision seized him. He saw the storm Leviathan, its immense form thrashing against its ethereal bonds, its cries tearing through the fabric of reality. He felt its raw, untamed power, a storm about to break, and then, he saw the shadowy figures closing in, their dark energies coalescing, a suffocating shroud descending. He felt a searing pain, not his own, but a borrowed agony, and then, a voice, a sibilant whisper that slithered into his mind, speaking of containment and harvest. The vision shattered, leaving Zan gasping for breath, the teacups still in pieces on the floor. The temporal energy he had tried to harness had dissipated, leaving him drained and shaken. He looked around his small, sunlit room, the familiar objects suddenly seeming alien fragile. The world outside continued its indifferent march, unaware of the unseen currents that threatened to engulf it. He knew, with a chilling clarity, that this was not a figment of his imagination. The visions were becoming more frequent, more intense. They were a warning, a premonition of a darkness that was not merely brewing, but actively taking shape. The Syndicate, a name he had only heard whispered in hushed tones in the city's underbelly, a name synonymous with ruthlessness and forbidden practices, was clearly at the heart of this disturbance. Their pursuit of power, their willingness to exploit even the most primal forces of nature, resonated with the shadowy figures and the caged spirit he saw in his visions. His own temporal abilities, he suspected, were a double-edged sword in this unfolding crisis. They allowed him to perceive the disturbance, to glimpse the Syndicate's horrifying machinations. But they also marked him. If they were capable of ensnaring an elemental spirit, what would they do to a being who could manipulate time itself? The thought sent a cold dread through him. He was a prize or a threat to be neutralized. He closed his eyes, trying to find a calm center within the temporal storm that raged within him. He had to understand what was happening, not just for his own safety, but for the safety of others. The suffering of the storm Leviathan was a reflection of a deeper corruption, a wound inflicted upon the world itself. And if his nascent powers were to be anything more than a personal burden, they had to be used to mend that wound, to push back against the encroaching darkness. He remembered Kalen's words, relayed to him by a frantic, coded message from Ilara. The mention of an elemental spirit, the timing of a clandestine operation, the location, it all began to align with the fragmented visions that haunted Zan. He saw the connection, the terrifying synergy between Ilara's perilous investigation and his own disturbing premonitions. The Syndicate was indeed weaving a serpent's coil, and its venom was spreading. He stood up, his movements heavy with a newfound resolve. He was still learning, still faltering, but the urgency of the situation could no longer be ignored. His visions, once a source of confusion and fear, were now a catalyst. They were a map of the danger, and a silent plea for intervention. He might not be able to control the ebb and flow of time with perfect precision, but he could no longer stand idly by and witness the world being consumed by darkness. The whispers of forbidden magic, the cries of a captive spirit, they were a call to action. And Zan, despite his fears and his unrefined power, would answer. He had to. The very fabric of time seemed to depend on it.